Oh, hello Internet. My name is Quinn, and this is Blondihacks. As is tradition here, it's September, and that means it's an anniversary Q&A. So I'm out here behind the shop and thought I'd answer a few questions that I've gotten from you in comments and on Patreon there over the recent weeks. And I got a few fun clips of an antique tractor show that I went to with my dad this year. So I'll splice those in here for variety. So let's go. I got a lot of questions about the move, of course, and I did my best to answer those in the previous Q&A video, but I've got a couple more that I can address here. The first one is a lot of people asked about when moving to a different country, does all of your shop stuff have to go through customs? And the answer is yes. Of course, it depends which border you're crossing and in which direction for which laws apply. But I think in general, certainly for the move that I did, all of your household goods, anything that you've owned for more than, say, 2 years, you don't have to pay any kind of import taxes or duties on or anything like that. There are a few exceptions, anything of really high value, so anything over $10,000 probably, or anything that's like a negotiable instrument, so jewelry, things like that. There's going to be extra probably things involved, and of course alcohol, firearms, those types of things that are heavily regulated. There's going to be special considerations, and of course cars. Cars are incredibly regulated. In my case, I didn't even try to move a car over the border. I've done that before. Frankly, unless you really love that car, it's not worth the hassle. So just sell the car in your old country and buy a new one in the new country. The featured bark at this year's show is the Rumley oil pull. Here's a beautiful example. A lot of folks think these engines ran on oil, but in fact they burn kerosene. It's just oil cooled. That big rectangular block at the front is an oil-to-air heat exchanger. And this was a pretty big innovation at the time because one of the challenges of early tractors was cooling. The machines are stationary or moving slowly most of the time, so it's difficult to get heat out of the engine with any sort of traditional radiator where you can't get airflow. The oil cooling then allowed them to run the engines hotter and thus make more power. We still have oil-cooled engines today. We just call them air-cooled engines. Air-cooled Porsches and Volkswagens are really oil-cooled. The oil is doing most of the heavy lifting of getting the heat out of the engine. Let's talk about soldering versus soldering. Every single time I do any amount of silver soldering or silver soldering on my channel, I get 758 comments about how I'm pronouncing it incorrectly because there's clearly an L in the word. And this generally comes from people from the country who pronounce this word Leicester, so I don't think you have any moral high ground on phonetic spelling of things. But that said, soldering is the traditional pronunciation here in Canada and the United States, and so I'm typically going to keep saying it that way, but I'll throw in the occasional solder as well because I do actually kind of like the sound of that word. This is a very rare and interesting engine. It's an Altman Taylor 30-50. This was a 4-cylinder gasoline engine, and that cylinder at the front that looks like an open-ended fire tube boiler is actually a water heat exchanger. Once again, an innovation in cooling technology. These tractors were apparently favored by road builders because they did well in the hot, harsh environment of road building. They made a lot of horsepower for their size and weight. Here's a fun one that many of you asked, and I appreciate that you noticed. What happened to the red welding cap in my intros? Well, I typically wear that cap when my hair is getting a little bit on the long side. It helps keep it out of my face and keep it from, getting me murdered in machine tools. But I also tend not to wear it in the hotter weather like we've been having here lately. And typically I just wear it for the intros because it's, part of the character, if you will, that introduces each video. But, new shop, new country, new intro look maybe. Let's find out. For old time's sake, huh? Yeah. You may have also noticed if you're a longtime viewer that I wear these safety glasses in the intro, but I don't actually wear them in the shop. I bought these because they look cool, but they're kind of annoying to actually work in. The heavy frames limit your visibility to the sides, and they tend to collect moisture and fog up really kind of annoying. For actually working, I use these basic 3M safety glasses, which are awesome. Tons of visibility, they stay clear, they don't fog up as easily, so I'll link to these below. You don't see a lot of British tractors at the Canadian shows, but this is one that I love and just had to show. This is a Field Marshal, and aside from the distinctive exhaust stack on these, what's really cool about them is the way you start them. You start it with a 12-gauge shotgun shell. It has a little port on the side of the engine for a blank that you insert in there, and the shotgun shell kicks the engine over hard enough to start it. Starting tractors was a pretty big problem back in those days, and, well, frankly, it still is, although nowadays we have glow plugs and starter fluid. But the innovations that people came up with for how to start these big, slow engines on cold days is pretty interesting. Speaking of the Rumley oil pull, a father and son team built this delightful working model of one, complete with functioning Rumley thresher, and they were threshing grain with it. A number of folks asked how big the new shop actually is, and I wasn't certain, so I measured it for you. And the answer is, it is 24 feet long and 22 feet wide, although I'm only using half of the width because I am still parking my truck on the other side there. I may start parking the truck outside if I decide I want to take over the whole garage at some point, but for now I'm enjoying having the truck warm and cozy inside, and I've got plenty of room over here for what I need. Lucky for me, there was some steam at this show. This is a beautiful little 2-cylinder engine that someone brought. You'll note that there's no flywheel on it. The cylinders are quartered to each other, much like a locomotive is, so the engine is effectively continuously self-starting, and thus it doesn't need a flywheel. And this is actually designed to run at high speed and start and stop quickly because this engine ran the carriage on a sawmill, so it needed to run back and forth quickly and accelerate quickly. That's something that steam engines aren't normally good at, so this is a specific design to solve that problem. Beautiful little engine, it ran beautifully, and it's running off of this boiler here, and they had a cool little steam-powered duplex water pump there on the boiler as well. I also got to meet a few viewers hanging around these engines. Seems like steam people always find each other. A few folks asked me to talk about safety in the new shop, and I've talked about safety extensively in many of my beginner video series. I'll refer you to my Lathe Skills playlist and my Absolute Beginners playlist linked below, but that's mainly about personal safety. So let's talk a little bit about fire safety. Here, of course, I have a fire extinguisher. I always have at least one fire extinguisher in the shop that gets inspected regularly. Then, of course, I have a fire-safe can for oily rags, and anything with acetone or other flammable chemicals on it goes in here. And then I also have a strict policy against storing compressed combustible gases inside. So I have a storage bin outside the shop here that stores my acetylene and propane tanks. It's currently empty because I haven't replaced those tanks since my big move. And this is not for nothing. I did the same thing at my last shop, fortunately, because one day I came out to fetch my acetylene tank and there was quite a strong smell of acetylene all around the area. It turns out the valve on the acetylene tank had gone bad. It's really not that surprising if you look at some of these tanks. Here's my last one. These things have been to heck and back, and while they're built to last and they're built for this kind of abuse, some of them are pretty rough by the time you get them. So it's not too shocking that they go bad sometimes. There was a big room of hit and miss engines at the show as well. I love these things. They have such a great sound. The name comes from the fact that they govern their speed by interrupting ignition when RPM gets too high. So they only fire on cycles where the RPM is at or below the speed that the governor is set to. So they have that poppy, snorty sort of sound to them. They're a very simple engine and very, very reliable, which is why they were an early stationary gasoline engine. On the left there, you can see the passive cooling system. It's just a water jacket around the cylinder and the water evaporates off. One of the things I like to do with these anniversary videos is take a quick look at the stats for the channel, and I see that we've just crossed 150,000 subscribers as of this recording, which is unbelievable. If you had told me 4 years ago that this channel was going to hit 150,000 in 4 years, I would not have believed you. It's so humbling. I mean, I've got the thing on the wall and I still can't hardly believe it. that there's so many of you who want to tune in every week to watch a weird old lady make weird things in her little hobby machine shop. So thank you so much, those of you who support me financially, and those of you who donate tooling, and even those of you who just go down below to say a nice thing every week. All of that stuff adds up. It really means the world to me. It keeps me going, keeps me coming out here on those days when I don't necessarily feel like it, and keeps my spirits up when a project doesn't turn out great, and keeps me coming back every week, and hopefully keeps you coming back every week. Oh, but I saved the best for last. They did a threshing demonstration with this mighty Case steam traction engine here. I believe this is a Case 110, which is one of the larger ones they made. The largest, of course, was the legendary Case 150. There's a fellow down in the States who operates one of those. Be sure to Google that on YouTube. There's some amazing footage of it. But this Case 110 was an awesome machine. They were running it on wood, and it was barely breaking a sweat running this big threshing machine.
Try to replace the whole tool at the same time.
And I even managed to grab some footage of them putting it away for the night. Many folks asked if I was planning to insulate these garage doors, and absolutely I am. They are actually already insulated. They're a double wall door, about an inch thick with foam in the center there, but I'm going to be adding another layer of insulation on top. And the doors are also already air sealed all the way around the sides, top and bottom. But I'm also probably going to be doing some additional sealing there as well. And I have an HVAC contractor coming in to discuss heating options in here. I don't need it to be the South Pacific in here, but I want to keep the temperature above the dew point in the winter to avoid condensation that would rust all of the precision machines. It wasn't all tractors though. Here's a slightly older technology. I'm not sure how you would rate the power of this setup. Only if there was some kind of units or something to represent the pulling power here. In any case, there were excellent demonstrations of plowing with 4-horse and 8-horse hitches. Here's another follow-up from my move. I had used a lot of these plastic bins both to store materials and to store a lot of other stuff from the shop, and I talk a big game about them, but actually I learned that they don't all survive moving that well, especially when they have a lot of weight in them. You can see here the handle broke off of my brass bin here. It's got about 50 pounds in it. Even without that long piece sticking out, the lid doesn't close anymore and the handle is gone. I had a few that suffered this. And you can see here this bin has been damaged. It looks like it got punctured somehow and the bottom of it has started to shatter, so this one is trash. I had this happen to a few of these plastic bins. The thing about cardboard boxes is that they can deform and deflect and so on under the shocks and loads and so on of moving. And the plastic bins tend to just shatter, especially if they've got a lot of weight in them. So food for thought when you're packing. When I was setting up my mill in the new shop, a lot of folks asked, why don't I use the chip tray that comes with it? And, well, the fact is, because it's just kind of useless. You can see that it's not very big. It really only covers a small area under the mill. And honestly, it just makes cleaning under the mill more difficult because you've got more edges and surfaces to get in and around. It doesn't really catch any chips because on a milling machine, the chips primarily go in this area here. So this little tray is basically useless. Now it might be more useful for catching coolant if I were to run flood coolant someday, and in fact this mill table is plumbed for flood coolant, so I theoretically could, but if that's the case then maybe I'll try putting it back under there, but for now the thing is just in the way. The lathe over here is a completely different story because the tray is the size of the entire machine, and the chips on the lathe mainly fall straight down. They kind of pile up in this area here. Occasionally, if you're cutting really hot and heavy, then the chips might fly out here a little bit. You could put up a plexiglass shield to bounce them back in if you want, but Mostly you just have a little bit of floor sweeping in that case, so the lathe is pretty civilized and tends to drop the chips in the tray anyway. Well, that does it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching and supporting me through 4 years of this crazy adventure. There's lots more to come. I've got so many things that I want to build, and I'm going to do it all right here with you guys. And I really appreciate everything that you guys do to keep all this going. So once again, thanks for watching, and here's to another 4 years.